Hello, everyone. Welcome to the American Center New Delhi Online. We're excited for sharing a wonderful program with you this afternoon. My name is Rosemary Higgins. I'm the director at the American Center. While I have you captive, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the American Center. We are the cultural center for the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi. We host a series of programs every week. We've switched to an online platform, so please tune into our Facebook page to learn about the amazing events that we have. We have a concert series on Fridays during lunchtime, and we have amazing panel discussions like the one we're sharing here today. So I'd like to hand it over to my friend and colleague, Sonakshi Chowdhury. She is the research and editorial lead at Women in Labor, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about Women in Labor and the wonderful event on women in business that we have today. Over to you, Sonakshi.
Thank you so much, Rose. And thank you everyone for joining us for the live event today. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to Women in Labor, which is a podcast series inspired by the alarming fact that women are dropping out of India's labor force at a pretty drastic rate. Now, anecdotally, it may seem like more women are working. We're in boardrooms and factories, on construction sites and in fields and practically everywhere else. But the data says something different. In the years between 2004 and 2012, nearly 19.6 million women fell off India's labor map, according to World Bank estimates. So to tackle the question of what is going on with women in work in India, Women in Labor was born. Through our journey of unpacking the data on the podcast, we've also had a chance to engage with women's lived experiences and to talk about a whole host of topics that inform this debate, including motherhood, marriage, public spaces, and education. So do tune into the podcast. It's available at www.womeninlabor.com. Comedian Aditi Mittal hosts the episodes with filmmaker Christina McGillivray, and I promise this is an unbiased view. The episodes are extremely engaging. The podcast is supported by our colleagues over at the American Center in New Delhi. And as Rose mentioned, we've had some wonderful events with the folks over at Wild City, and there's a bunch of great stuff to come. And speaking of engaging episodes and events, I'm delighted to introduce our host for today's session, Namita Bhandare. Her reporting on the issue actually served as an inspiration for Women in Labor's founders, Christina and Laura, when they created the podcast. And she also happens to be our first interview for the podcast on episode 1. Aditi goes so far as calling her the godmother of the podcast. Namita is an award-winning journalist with nearly 30 years of reporting experience for various publications, including magazines Sunday and India Today and the daily Hindustan Times. In 2013, she was appointed India's first gender editor for Mint newspaper and remained in this position until 2016. She is at present an independent journalist who writes a fortnightly column on gender for the Hindustan Times and also writes for Mint, IndiaSpend and Foreign Policy. So over to you, Namita.
Thank you so much, Sonakshi, for that very generous introduction. And for actually in a few sentences, you really hit the nail on the head in terms of women and work and why women are dropping out of the workforce, which remains a mystery to me for all the reporting I've done on it. I'd like to also welcome and thank our online audience for joining us here at the American Center's Facebook Live page. We will be taking questions at the end, so please do fire away and I will come back to you. So the coronavirus pandemic has indeed resulted in a change of venue. We're all at home talking from where we are, but of course has not, I'm glad to say, dented either our enthusiasm or our will to plow ahead. I'm just going to add a little bit to what Sonakshi said about the podcast. And I've been listening to the podcast when I go, when I'm walking, when I'm on the treadmill, and it is amazing. Do not miss it. You'll know that this podcast has been taking a very long, hard look at women and work. What is women's work? Just defining what is women's work, why women work, what causes them to drop out of paid work, the role of family in supporting, what are the support structures we need to be able to get out and work, and of course, what is unpaid work? We all do it, and we're all discovering the unpaid work in these days of coronavirus and the lockdown. I'm very excited to be moderating this discussion with 3 trailblazers, inspirational women. They inspire me, and Chiki Sarkar is the founder of Juggernaut Books, which is, I believe, India's first digital and perhaps only digital publishing company so far, which focuses on short-length books, many of them written by first-time authors. The app, Chiki, I believe has been downloaded over 1 million times so far, and you have a catalog of 7,000 titles as we talk. Chiki has been honored as a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader and was a Forbes 2018 Power Trailblazer. Ambika Seth studied hospitality management in Switzerland, then went to Vietnam to work with Six Senses and set up many of his resorts there. When she returned to India, she set up CAARA in 2014. And CAARA is, I would describe CAARA as a bespoke catering company that will cater to even small events, but it has 3 verticals. So there's the catering aspect of it, there's the standalone cafes, and then there's a culinary school. Many ingredients are in fact sourced from Farm Love, which believes in chemical-free vegetables, fruit, and herbs, and is again a new concept, I would say, in India because of the encompassing of all these 3 aspects. Suchita Salwan studied economics at the Hindu College, then went on to gain work experience at the Commonwealth Games and BBC Entertainment. And then in 2014, launched Little Black Book, which is such a simple concept, but was such a revolutionary idea then because no one had done it. The idea was to connect local brands and businesses with consumers across India. So Little Black Book now gets reaches for 4.5 million users every month, connecting them to 100,000 local brands and businesses. She's also, by the way, raised $7.5 million US dollars from institutional as well as angel investors. And she's also been on the Forbes Under 30 list, Fortune India's 40 Under 40, and has been a speaker at Harvard University's India Conference. So I know you're waiting to hear from my speakers. Let's get right to it. Suchita, let's start with you. So growing up, is this something that you knew you were going to do? Did you always know you're going to be an entrepreneur? And what led to Little Black Book?
So great to be here, and fantastic to also talk about something very close to my heart, which is getting women back to work. And Namita, your report was fantastic. I remember going through it cover to cover. It was so good, and it was great to see the way you had communicated data points and just simplified it for folks like me to understand. The work that you've done on that was fantastic. So shout out to you, and great to be. Great to be on this panel with everyone. I think for me, I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I actually had the opposite ambitions of being an entrepreneur. I wanted to be one of those, living in New York City, making bank, through some cool hedge fund type situation. My goal in life was to actually go to Harvard University, get an MBA. I imagined a bit of a checkbox life for myself, at least when I was younger. But I think for me, the big trigger was, as I'm sure, Namita, your daughter studied at Vasant Valley as well. You work your ass off, right, in school, and you get like a 92%, and you go to Delhi University and you think it's going to be amazing, and then you're just like, not what I anticipated it to be. And I think that's exactly what happened with me, which was, I worked very hard through school, got into Hindu for econ, which is not an easy course to get into. And you just realize that, a lot of what's put out there is smoke and mirrors. And I think that sort of gave me a bit of a nudge to open my mind and have a slightly more broader, perspective on where I saw my career going and things that I wanted to work on. LBV actually started as a passion project. I was working at the BBC, and I was earning well at the BBC as a 22-year-old. So I had no reason to leave Delhi, though secretly I've always wanted to get out of Delhi. I think because I couldn't get out of Delhi, I thought, might as well fall in love with what my city has to offer, right? So every weekend I'd go to a new part in town, discover a business, and post about that business on my Tumblr page. And that's actually how LBB started as a weekend project. So I'm a total accidental entrepreneur. I had no hopes and dreams, to embark on this. But I do think entrepreneurship has been, one of it's been better than what I would imagine an MBA to be, right? I think the amount the amount I've been able to learn, the people I've had a chance to meet, Ambika included, it was great to see her start Farm Love and then, take on CAARA with so much steam. So yeah, I mean, to everyone who's watching this, entrepreneur or not, it is something that if you have the passion for something, if you truly believe in something, and if you're disciplined to see it through, it is truly one of those remarkable experiences that you can take on.
Right. Did I just lose Ambika? No, here's Ambika. Ambika, I wanted to ask you as well. I mean, are you also an accidental entrepreneur? Because you started with Six Senses in Vietnam, and then you decided to not work for someone else, but actually work for yourself. So how did that shift happen, and why did it happen? I can't hear.
I think in terms of wanting to be an entrepreneur, that was a line that I was going to take. That for me was not accidental. I knew, I think I come from a family background of entrepreneurs. I've watched my father, literally his first baby is his work. And for me, all I sort of knew was, watching him create his own business and with such passion, that it was a very natural, normal thing for me to think that eventually I was going to also do something on my own, and be also very privileged to be able to start something on my own, because not everyone can just say, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. You need a lot of backing and you need a lot of support to do that. But as far as CAARA is concerned today, that was definitely a journey, and I think I went through a lot of different things before finally stabilizing on what I'm doing today. So we spoke about Farm Love and we spoke about Six Senses, and I had a hospitality education from the École Hôtelière de Lausanne, was completely hell-bent that I was going to remain in hotels and manage hotels and resorts, and went on to get work experience with Six Senses. But something sort of went click at that point. There was a reason why I chose Six Senses, because I completely admire even today their way of using sustainability and local produce and architecture in terms of their design of their hotels and resorts and their entire ethos. Moving forward, I did get that experience from them, and it was absolutely fantastic. But having been away from India for 12 years, I had this very strong urge to want to come back home. And I wanted to come back and I wanted to do something for India. I didn't know at that time what that capacity would be. And it was very accidental that Farm Love happened. I was looking for land in Haryana. Farm Love happened by accidentally meeting farmers, seeing what situation was happening over there, working with them, creating this brand. And then really full-fledged doing farming, which I had absolutely no background on. But when I started that, I started questioning, a very basic question that maybe some of us forget is, where does our food come from? And it was this kind of drive of where does our food come from? What is the supply chain? What kind of produce do we get in India? How to sort of make that available to everybody, is when I joined hands with my business partner, and that's how CAARA was formed. So we went through a lot of different stages and different steps, and I had obviously a lot of support to be able to start it. But I had no idea I was going to get into mainstream food and beverage. I was a hotel girl going to manage hotels. If you spoke to me 12 years ago.
Right. Chiki, you began in publishing. You've stuck with publishing, of course. You started with Bloomsbury, then moved to Random House, and then after the merger with Penguin India, became India's publishing head. Now, launching Juggernaut, which was such an out-of-the-box concept, must have been a bit of a risk, or a huge risk, actually. Were you scared when you took it?
So, I mean, Juggernaut has two parts to it. We have what we call a traditional print business, where I publish people like Twinkle Khanna, William Dalrymple, or Nobel Prize winners Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo, blah, blah, blah. Namita, I was also meant to publish you in that list.
Let's not go there.
And we won't go there. I'm not going to bug you like an editor does. But alongside that, it also has its own app, which we've been described as a Netflix of books. Look, starting out is a risk for everyone. I mean, everyone on this panel must, we all have had careers with good, big companies and would probably have done fairly well in these big companies, right? I think, so to do it on your own is always a risk. But I think you, for me, like everyone else on this panel, I wouldn't have called myself especially entrepreneurial, except that one, I think most publishers are enterprising by nature because it's just a very, publishing essentially what you do. You basically take chances on ideas. You say, I like this novel. So I'm going to put some money down and I'm going to see how it does, right? Or I think that this idea is going to work. I'm going to go and find that right writer and get them. So every day you're coming up with an idea and then you're taking a chance on it. And you're making multiple bets, 99% of which fails. And then 1% does well. And then of that 1%, a little bit does super well. And then it keeps you afloat. And so I think you often find many publishers are often like leaving large corporate jobs and setting up on their own and going independent. It's a pretty common thing across the world. And so in that sense, the jump isn't scary. The digital part was, it just felt natural. I mean, I think we're all on it, right? I mean, we're all on our phones, and to not find a way for books to be organically on phones seems to me like, I mean, so I didn't think of it as a risk, as like, I have to ask this question of myself. And I think all publishers should, right? And answer them in different ways. I'm not saying my answer is the right answer. Do I think that you need to create your own app? I don't know. You know, I mean, it happens to be something I think is kind of essential, but you know, I completely accept that that may not be the essential thing. So I didn't think of it as a risk. At the time, I think the biggest things, I remember when I was leaving and sort of people in Random House and Penguin were like talking to me and saying, you know, why are you leaving, blah, blah, blah. And I remember somebody telling me, look, you just got married and you're going to have children now. And is this the time for you to do it? And, you know, at the time I wasn't pregnant or anything. And I said, wow, of course, you know, I was a bit of a cowgirl about it. But that, I think, if I want to bring this back more than enterprise to women's issues, and I don't know what the other people in my panel, I've had, you know, I've set up my business and literally my children came immediately alongside it. The app launched April 2016, and I discovered I was pregnant in April 2016. You know, I feel like my two babies happened at a week apart. And I really think of it as, I mean, I'm seeing Ambika like shake her head. You do think of it in those terms, right? They're both your children and all of that. And so that, I think the person who gave me that advice was right. You know, now when I look back, I think, what the fuck, you know, like baby business. I mean, you know, I didn't have maternity leave.
But that's the thing. And we're going to come back to talking about this because I want to talk in detail about this. I don't think a man would have been asked that question ever. You're just married, you're going to have a baby. I mean, it's only women who are asked this question.
The person who asked me this was a woman who was an incredibly accomplished woman who had done a lot. So I don't think it was a sexist question. The point is there is this reality, right?
The reality is that it's only women who are asked this question. But I will come back to this. I just want to, since we're talking about starting out, the roadblocks, stumbling blocks, Ambika, what for you was the most difficult thing? Was it year one or was it some other year? You know, what was the biggest hurdle you had to overcome?
You know, there's no rule book on how to start a business. And I don't think there ever will be a rule book. So I don't think I can say that year one was any harder than year five. To be honest, all years have been hard. But you gain a lot more maturity and you learn, really, when they say that you learn from your mistakes, you really do learn from your mistakes, you know. So I think in terms of when I started, I do think I was quite naive. And, you know, I sort of, I made a lot of wrong hiring decisions. I had a lot of people sort of take advantage of me and my maybe softness a little bit. So I think in that sense, you know, I've become a lot more harder and I've been able to segregate my heart from my mind in terms of how I run the business. And obviously taking a lot, you know, I always say that I am, and CAARA is who it is because of its team, you know. So in terms of people management, if you ask me, one of the things that I do the most is people management, whether that's my client base, because I'm so, you know, my business is so client front, or whether that's internally, you know. And I spend so much time just managing the team and making sure that everyone is on the right path. And that has been, I think, one of my biggest challenges and also one of my biggest successes in terms of where I am today.
So if I can just ask you a quick follow-up before I go to Suchita. So as a woman boss, do you sometimes encounter a certain attitude from, let's say, a male chef or a male client trying to play hardball because he thinks he can get away with it because you're a woman?
So it's quite funny because the kitchen is quite male dominated, but funnily enough, I have never felt any form of what you're speaking about as far as the chefs are concerned. And in fact, one of the things that I do in the kitchen and with my hiring is to have an equal amount of men and women working in the kitchen, and we have managed to do that, which has been fantastic. But I have definitely encountered employees who have just not been able to handle a woman boss younger than them, and the fact that to be answerable to me to such an extent that they just couldn't handle it and they walked out. It was really.
What was the problem? What was exactly the problem in working with a woman boss?
I just think that one was my age. I think that being at that time, so I'm 32 now, so I started off 5 years ago. So at that time, I was much younger, and they couldn't handle the fact that being much younger, being a woman, and being in the position that I am, why would they think that they were any better, or they had to answer back to me? So it was a very big ego problem. That was, if you boil it down, it was a very big ego problem. But I've also, on the other side of things, encountered completely bizarre experiences where, when I was buying land and having to deal with government officials and deal in tiny little villages and in areas that you won't imagine where I've been for land, and I've had people insinuate to meet them at the guest house, and they'll say, come and meet me at the guest house if you want the paper signed. And it was the last paper I needed before I got my mutation done for my paperwork. So I had to deal with all spectrums of in terms of dealing with men in that sort. And either you can be completely like, oh my god, I can't handle this, or you tell them, what, like, this is ridiculous and I'm not going to let this affect me, and you just keep going on.
Correct. In fact, one of the podcasts that I recently heard, as part of the Women in Labor series, was the one with Mahima, who's the Twitter policy head, and again, a very young woman and also a young mother. And she spoke about a meeting that she had to go for, where they were just kind of, you're too young, the other guys are bringing very senior people. And she said, well, I'm a senior person. He said, yeah, but you look very young. And, so Suchita, do you encounter this? That because you're just this young woman, there's this whole attitude, who does she think she is? Firstly, you're a woman. Secondly, you're young. You're supposed to listen to your elders and betters. Do you encounter that? Is that a problem?
I forgot to unmute. So fortunately, I think, the industry that I'm in is tech, and everyone in tech is young. So at least from that perspective, I haven't had the ageist, angle pulled on me. But I think, my world is a little interesting because there's a part of my world which is in tech startups, and then there's another part of my world which is in sales, customer acquisition, marketing, etc. Right, which is very old boys. It's an old boys dominated world. I do think, being basically a giant helps. I'm super tall. So I think that's been like one of my, jokes aside, but that's actually been one of my saving graces. I'm 5'10". So usually they're just like, oh, buddhi hogi kyunki lambi hai. I don't know how they think, but you get the point, right? So I think I think that's been like my little card to play. But jokes aside, I do think, to the point that Ambika made, you have to roll with the punches, man. And to give you an example, I have a working mom, right? My mom's a cardiologist, and she's one of the few female cardiologists in India. And I've seen how much she's had to work to, make her career what it is. And I think when you grow up around working mothers, a lot of what you realize is that it's tough, but you just have to roll with the punches. And I think, a tactic that's helped me a lot is just think about what your goal is, think about what your desired outcome is, and work towards that instead of getting distracted by, stuff that comes your way, because it will come your way. I do think one of the, it's a little strange because I've had a pretty liberal upbringing, everything from the school I went to, the college I went to. You're used to being around men, right? You're used to being looked at as like one of the guys or whatever. I do think when you get into the corporate world and just the world, the professional world, the dynamics of all of that changes, right? And I think I was reminded of my gender only when I started working. I think up until I started working, it was just like a thing, right? Not the thing.
So like when and how?
I think, I mean, my first two jobs, as simple as that, where even when you look at corporate structures, you see very few women in senior leadership roles, right? You see this kind of line drawn in between men and women in terms of even their interaction. So, in school and in college, you're used to being pals with guys and it doesn't matter. And, you can have a pretty platonic conversation without it going in 10 different directions. But I do think when you get into the corporate world or when you just get into the working world, the dynamics of men and women and how they coexist, especially in high pressure and high stress settings, a lot of that changes. And I think that reality became, pretty obvious to me as I sort of, grew out in my career.
Right. So when you were pitching for funding, was it a problem? Was your gender ever brought up?
So, again, I think, I've been pretty fortunate that way where, I mean, not fortunate because it's weird that you need to be fortunate for your gender to not be brought up, but my co-founder is male. And my co-founder is technical. So usually in pitches, you need a technical co-founder, especially if you're raising money from your more traditional VCs, right? So for me, I haven't had a negative experience pitching. I do think a lot of what happens is I'm usually always the only female in the room. Most VCs are male. Usually the only female who you end up meeting is the secretary, and no disrespect to secretaries, but you want to see more women in the boardroom, right? You want to see more women make decisions. And I do think, Ambika actually had the opposite problem where I've become softer over the years. I think I was a total straight shooter and I still am for the most part. But, now I think, now I wait for I wait for it to become 4 o'clock and I say what I'm actually thinking before 4. But I think, in a nutshell, I will never lie and say it's not tough. It is very tough. But I think walking into situations, knowing that it's going to be hard, knowing that you will have to work 200 times harder than your male counterpart or your male co-founder to be taken seriously, I think just knowledge is a big key, right? And just being able to prepare for situations like that is key. So I read all the time. I listen to a bajillion podcasts, and I think a lot of what it's done to me is it's just helped me want more, and it's helped me want to be better, and it's helped me want to know as much as I can. So you need to take it in a constructive way instead of letting it bring you down. At least that's what my take on it is.
Correct. So Chiki, you are in an industry where traditionally, which has a lot of women. You have a lot of women in publishing. I would say, in fact, women might be a majority, would be dominating. For a lot of working women, the mantra has been Sheryl Sandberg, lean in, just lean in, come what may, just stick it out and it will work out. Do you agree with that? Or do you tend to believe more with Anne Marie Slaughter, who says, why women can't still have it? Sorry.
So I'm in the Nora Ephron school, Namita. I don't know how many of you read that fabulous Nora Ephron. She wrote a commencement address for, I think she was at one of the colleges, and she's a woman who wrote When Harry Met Sally. She's a woman who directed Sleepless in Seattle, etc. She's a very funny writer, and she said it's a mess, and there it is. I don't know whether there's a grand theory. There's any of it. It's just messy. It's just not perfect. It's like going to be horrible. It's going to be fucked up, and there it is. So that's what I think, really. And I don't lean in. Namita, I never read it, but from what I understood, it was like you have to make your husband get up to the task and work and be equal with you and that kind of thing, right? Which, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. But it's never going to work. I mean, what I mean to say is no matter what we all do, it's not going to be perfect, right? If we're going to talk, I mean, but the point is, it's not going to stop me from working. I mean, I think that's the big thing. Why stop? Why should I stop working? And no one's told me to stop working. My family's not told me to stop working. I don't want to stop working. And I'm going to have an imperfect, messy life But the point is, everyone has an imperfect, messy life, right? Men or women. I mean, anyone who's listening to us today, I bet which one of us has a life that we're completely satisfied with, that we absolutely think like we've got it all under track. Every day is meticulous. Everything we ever want to do, we achieve. We don't, whether it's men or women, right? Women have their own particular set of problems. Men do too, you know, I mean, women have it harder, I agree. But Namita, I'm not going, I mean, you know, and I particularly think the motherhood thing skews stuff up. I mean, as I'd begun to say, I mean, I never got a maternity leave really through the 2 kids. I had to go back to work within a month and a half really of having both of them. I chose to feed them. So I had to like sit there and pump at office. I mean, it was kind of, I had to pump at book launches in bathrooms of auditoriums. It was horrible, you know, but I mean,
but it's not just about pumping, it's even later. It's about kids coming home from school, you know, latchkey kids and homework, and there's just so much guilt. I felt as a mother that it actually gets more difficult as your kids grow older, because, you know, when they're tiny, the work is mechanical, change diaper, give feed, you know, but when they're older, and somehow there doesn't seem to be a substitute for the mother. The father is very seldom that substitute. It's never equal. Would you agree, Ambika? What was it like, you know, after you had your son? What was working like? And mind you, you all are your own bosses. You know, so when Chiki says she did take maternity leave, I'm thinking, you know, wow, you could do that because you're your own boss. But, you know, I mean, you can't do that to other pregnant women at the workplace, right?
No. I mean, they need their 6 months. I mean, I have a male editor who's about to have, he and his boyfriend are going to have twins, surrogacy. I mean, we have to talk about his paternity, get his whatever he wants.
What is your paternity leave policy?
I mean, isn't the country 6 months now?
No, that's maternity leave. Paternity leave, it's nothing by law, but a lot of companies do. It varies from 5 days.
The mother. I mean, you know, he has a partner and 2 boys, but he's doing. I mean, I have conversations about sterilizers and formula and diapers with Parth. He's going to be the, you know, and night nurses. So I think he'll take whatever he wants whether it's a mother or father. I think he'll be.
Right.
That's what he wants. I think that's my view.
Ambika, I just want you to share with us, what was it like? You know, how did working life change for you after you became a mom?
You know, what I did was I mean, you had to just embrace it. You had the baby and you had your work, and you had to find a way that you had to make both of them work. And for me, I was opening my new restaurant a month after my son was born. So it was, he grew up on the bar table of my restaurant practically. And I think, you know, like Chiki said, like I can actually write an essay on the number of places where I have fed my child. I didn't pump, I took my baby with me everywhere I went.
Wow.
That's also, I have to say, reflects on my child, because he is so open and he is so willing to go to places and meet people. Because since he was a 1-month-old baby, I was out in the kitchens, in the office, in the restaurant, and my nanny was there. So I always say that she's completely God sent, because I could not have done anything without her. So I did have support. It's not like I didn't have support, but you just had to go on with it. I made a schedule. I even went to the gym in the morning to start losing my baby weight. Azad used to watch me gym in the morning with my instructor. We used to come home. We used to get ready for office. We would get ready for office and we would go to work together and finish our day and come back. And that's, you know, the first 6 months was exhausting, but I opened the restaurant and the business continued. And it just became like normal routine, and it became, you just find the courage somehow and the strength somehow to just do it.
So Suchita, I'm just wondering, you are not a mom to babies. I believe you've got 2 4-legged babies.
Yes, I have two lovely dogs.
Yes. So I'm just wondering that for your generation, is it changing? You know, it's not a secret that India has one of the worst gender gaps in terms of unpaid care work. And by unpaid care work, you mean housework, child work. And, you know, we are all privileged women. So we're talking about nannies and cooks, but, you know, most women, the reality is they have to trudge miles to get water. They have to get the firewood. You know, if somebody is sick in the house, you're looking after that. Elderly parents. I'm just wondering, is your generation more 50-50? I mean, how do you and your partner work it out? I mean, is it more 50-50 or is it still a gap and you feel that needs to be worked on?
So, I think more than women in entrepreneurship, I think the larger point of view is how do you just get women to look at financial independence as a priority, and figure out, what is the cost of that financial independence, and then take those calls accordingly, right? Namita, like you said, I think what all of us need to acknowledge is, as English-speaking women, we're already as English-speaking women who are running their own business, we are the smallest minority of women, right? Forget people, of women in our country. I do think with the obviously keeping the notion of privilege, etc., in check. I do think for our generation, it goes both ways. I have friends who, unfortunately have not taken their financial security and financial independence as a priority in their life, and again, to each their own. But to the point that you made earlier about Sheryl Sandberg versus Anne-Marie Slaughter, I think the one consensus that the both of them have is you cannot compromise on that financial independence, because in a world where the currency is money, if you don't have that and if you don't have control over it, you're already at the back foot, right? And again, financial independence means different things to different people. Financial independence, in my case, could be, a trip to some exotic location somewhere in the world, but that needn't necessarily be it for someone else, right? So I do think the dynamics that are playing out with our generation is, thanks to social media and thanks to platforms, people are allowed to work in their own silos, and people exist in their silos without recognizing that there is a world out there which is very different from theirs. My world is very progressive. My world is very, 50-50. I have never entered the kitchen in my life. I don't cook. I don't do any of those things. In between my male colleagues and me, chances are that I will, I am probably the more aggressive, assertive one in a conversation, than the typical notions that are associated with women at work. So I do think the dynamics are changing. I do think, now more than ever, women are recognizing that if they don't have their financial independence in check, it's going to bite them at some point later. And people are taking that much more seriously than before. So from my vantage point, it's obviously great to have supportive families, supportive partners, supportive colleagues. But again, unfortunately, even within the urban, and it was in your report as well, right? What's shocking is urban women are not getting back to work.
Yeah.
You would understand in the rural context, or maybe not even understand in the rural context, but what's shocking is urban women are not getting back to work. And that's where, just socio-economically and culturally, the conversation needs to change. Sorry, I digress from your original question, but
this is what I'm so glad you're talking about financial independence, because it is crucial. I mean, forget about the reports. Several reports that talk about how world GDP will go up by X% if more women participated, or women participated at equal power, with men. But the fact is, even in a field like tech, which is your field essentially, women enter in larger numbers than men, and then begin to drop off. It's like there's this little ladder. So marriage is one milestone, the drop out. Then you go up, and then there's motherhood, and then another bunch of women will drop up. Then by the time the children reach high school, another bunch. So that by the time you reach the executive suite and the boardroom, as you said, we all say we need women in the boardroom, but where are the women? Because they've just dropped out. It's like a journey. It's a trajectory where women have dropped out.
So could I just add one small thing there, Namita? I think a big reason is also role models, and the lack of female role models. I'll if you don't mind, I'll just take a minute narrating an example. The former vice president of product at Paytm, Prashant Singh, lovely guy. He recently did a beautiful tweet storm on women on Mother's Day, where he had probably gone to one of these, big IITs or some big engineering college. And he said at his recent get-together, they basically did an analysis, typical techies, right? They did an Excel sheet analysis of what makes people successful. And long story short, what they found was from their batch, the 8 most successful people were, the one commonality amongst all of them was that they had working mothers. And it goes back to the point that I made earlier, right? That role models, everyone on this call is a role model, right? And not only are you a role model to your kids, but you're also a role model to the women that you work with in your office. You know, they're looking up to folks like all of us. So I do think that, hopefully things will change with more and more women becoming entrepreneurs, with more and more women like Sheryl Sandberg, irrespective of your opinion of her, not your opinion, but one's opinion of her, what she's done to just make women realize that, being the COO of the world's second largest tech company, that is an option. I think that's incredible, right? And that deserves to be celebrated.
So, Chiki, I know you've got a little visitor. He wants to say hi to us.
No, I've not put him away with Khan Academy. He's not going to bother.
What's his name?
His name's Shoki. But I wanted to interject here and say, in the end, I think this has to do with, all of us run businesses, right? So I have my CEO as a young mother as well. So we talk about this a lot, right? And we also talk about that point that you raised, Namita, which is that the issues of women in work actually get worse as children get older, right? And as far as I know, this leaking pipeline tends to really happen at that stage. There's marriage and there's children, and those are the big areas where, so you have, there are people who are entering the job force, post-college or whatever, and then they drop off at these points, right? And the thorny, really hard question is, what do you do with your women employees? And I'm very torn, because I have, on one hand, I'm a boss, right? So let me give you an example. Let's say that I have a woman editor who's just commissioned 10 writers, and she goes on maternity leave and she takes 6 months off, right? And this book comes in. Okay, so who's going to edit it? Who's going to take it through press? Blah, blah, blah. Now, Ambika will have similar issues. All of you guys will have similar issues around your workflow, right? That's in the maternity leave stage. Then flexibility for mothers if there are issues with children, etc. There's an important meeting, but your child's had an accident, right? The mother has to take off. And now let's say it's a really important meeting. It's a meeting to get business from something, and this person needs to be there. These are the moments, right? When these are the everyday challenges that, and I've had this conversation with my mentor, who is she's an old school 70s feminist. She began her life in the first feminist publishing house in Britain called Virago, Alexandra Pringle, but she and I talk, but she's been a boss as well, and she says, it's really interesting because we have to give 6 months maternity leave. People, mothers, of course, have to have babies quite close together. So you're often seeing that same person out of that workforce. So then what do? How do we keep our work going, but at the same time support women? And I'm not sure that, by the way, I will make the feminist choices. I have to be honest. I haven't come to that, because as it happens, Juggernaut has mostly women who are either unmarried or past marriage. Past child, the kids have grown up. I think that I will make terrible mistakes. I think that I will give in to all kinds of pressure. I think that I will not have easy answers. I don't know what you women are going to do on stage. And that's just me, and particularly with small businesses, right? If there's a big Google or whatever, there's a lot of backup. Small businesses, harder to get that backup. So how do we, if we aren't able to fully, then, this maternity leave policy that the government has, as far as I know, in Europe, the government pays for it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, I don't think that we're doing that, right, as far as I know. So that means that if you're a small business, you're paying for this person, you're paying that salary, and you're paying for someone else to do that job as well. These are the real issues, right? Who's paying the money? Who's subsidizing this woman? And I don't know what these answers are. I don't know whether the government is really going to do anything really tangible to help. As the budget yesterday, we are a small, medium enterprises country. Are you really helping these companies be able to actually make policies that are useful and helpful to
right. And in fact, what I'm hearing is that a lot of small companies are just not hiring a certain demographic of women because they know that if she gets married, if she has babies, she's going to be gone, and they can't really afford to, you can't hire two people to do that job. So it is a difficult, there's no easy solution. Ambika, you've been very silent through this. So I just want to ask you, now that we're all working from home, is it difficult? I mean, we know why it's made it easier. I mean, every woman I speak to says, this is great. I'm with my kids. I can exercise. I can read. I can take a nap in the afternoon. But there's also the other flip side of it is that there is no longer a line between the personal and the professional. You can't just close the door and say, I'm home and I'm switched off, because you're never off. So, and also if I was to, okay, go ahead and then I'll ask you my follow-up.
No, please finish.
No, my follow-up was that if you were to look into your crystal ball, how do you see the future of work? And do you think working from home will make it much easier for women?
I think that, yes, working from home right now has had a lot of advantages, like we were discussing earlier, that I have more time with my family, both my husband as well and my son. But in all honesty, what you said is that, you can't just close the door, and working from home is also been a challenge, and somehow I just, have to tune out, and I have to have enough things to occupy my child to make sure, and then slot it, saying, from 10 to 12, I have my meetings, and then I have an hour to be with my son, and lunchtime, and then nap time is a great time because that's like 2.5 hours you have free to do all of your major stuff, and then evenings you keep free. So I've sort of created a little bit of a pattern for myself. But when it comes to, the future, and specifically with my industry, we've made it work right now. We've made working from home work right now because there was no other option. But moving forward, and obviously seeing, how everything pans out, I don't think that it's sustainable, unlike what Chiki said, that she said, she hopes that she can continue to work from home. Unfortunately for me, my business is too hands-on. I need to taste the food practically every day before it goes out. I need to be in the kitchen. We develop recipes on a daily basis. Nothing goes out without my or my chef's approval. So all that can't happen remotely. You got to be in the kitchen. So unfortunately for me, it's going to look like, we're going to have to obviously work within the realms of what situation we are in right now, but we're going to have to get back to our actual office. That's where we make all the magic with the food.
Correct. Suchita, do you want to weigh in on how working from home could change the game for women?
Absolutely, I think it's a great point that you brought up because to the point that everyone else made as well, the flexibility that it provides is great. I also think the other thing that it does is it helps organizations optimize for productivity as opposed to hours clocked in an office. And I think, a lot of us as founders are actually just rethinking how have we measured productivity, right? We've just been measuring it in the wrong way. And I think the other, pretty interesting phenomena that I see happening as a consequence of coronavirus and all the, ridiculousness that it's brought along with it, the silver lining actually has been that I feel the gig economy will suddenly wake up, right? Where there will be more cognizance of certain roles that can be done by freelancers. There will be more cognizance of roles that may not necessarily require full-time employment. And I think those kind of roles, is where it will become easier to integrate women within the workforce, right? So think of roles that don't require more than 3 to 4 hours of work in a day, or roles that have some amount of flexibility when it comes to timelines. So those are my two big hopes as a consequence of work from home and COVID. And I think just more and more people acknowledging that productivity needs to be rethunk. And that every role doesn't require a full-time employee. In fact, most roles don't require full-time employees. I think that narrative playing in should hopefully galvanize things for the better.
Correct, and of course, Jack Dorsey's just announced that Twitter will continue working from home for all time to come, which is great. I mean, great for people who don't want to waste time, particularly in cities like Delhi, or because you're just spending so much time commuting. And for me also, I feel the one thing I don't miss about working from work is the long meetings. They just go on and on and on, and you're like, just rolling your eyes and saying, just get me out of here. I don't want to be there. I think we have a little bit more time, and I'm just actually reminded that this session is called Key Moments in Growth. So I'm going to ask the three of you very quickly, what was that aha moment? You know, the moment when you knew you had made the right decision, and the moment that you knew that you had, I hate to use the word arrived, because, you know, the whole thing is a journey, right? So the moment that, you know, that you knew in your heart that, yes, you were doing all right. Chiki?
I think actually it's been this moment, because there's been tremendous growth with Juggernaut through this corona. You know, we really, even sort of on that Sunday when we had that trial lockdown, right? That Janta Day or whatever.
Yeah.
We kind of announced that we were going free. And so we did it fairly early on. And we've just had tremendous traction, massive growth, huge number of users, massive jump in book downloads, bigger awareness of the brand. So it's been amazing. I mean, the print side has worked for ages. And the app has sometimes worked, sometimes not. It's had its more up. It's had a less like curve up trajectory, but this moment has been outstanding for it. So our big thing is now to take this moment and now build on it and grow it and really see if Juggernaut will do well only if I can get people to pay for this stuff, right? I'm not giving out free materials. So I have to create payment plans. And so now the big thing is, can I take all these people who come online and then get at least a percentage to convert into a payment plan? That's the game.
Right. Ambika, I know you have to be there. You have to be in the kitchen. You have to be tasting the food. But has this moment fundamentally changed the way you're going to do business?
Completely. Actually, it's been quite interesting what's happened is that we've had to obviously rethink a lot of our strategy. I mean, I have physical restaurants, I have cookery classes, I have different various verticals that require, you know, you to be physically with other people, which is not going to happen for a very long time. Mm-hmm. But we did thankfully, you know, have already a delivery model in place. And mm-hmm. what's been very interesting for me is actually taking this as an opportunity to see how we will, you know, totally change our model to probably be to be more focused on not only food delivery, but also a one-stop shop for everything you need as in terms of gourmet and pantry essentials in your kitchen and in your home, and to also encourage people to use this. I mean, I'm seeing on Instagram and Facebook that every second picture is them cooking at home, and
yeah.
I hope
baking. What's with baking?
You know, I'm sure that it's not like this is all, you know, that's going to happen, but it has taught people, you know, that it is enjoyable. It's brought families together, and we are taking this opportunity to see how we can revamp our entire delivery model, be more tech savvy, be more automated, and have our cooked and our uncooked food available. You know, the best olive oils, the best vinegars, the cheeses, the cheese fromagerie section, etc., to be able to deliver. Because even when things get better, you don't necessarily want to step out and go to a crowded grocery store. This is, I mean, believe it, I mean, this is going to be with us for a while. So yes, we all have to change the way that we live. So we can be a one-stop shop for your, you know, sort of gourmet essentials. This is what we're planning to do. And we've taken the opportunity to actually grow this segment of our business. So it's been fantastic.
Correct. And of course, the days of the big Indian shadi and the big Indian celebration is over. So your big parties that you're catering, 5,000 people, I mean, that's not coming back in a hurry. So you're just reinventing and reconfiguring. Is that correct?
Definitely from the catering standpoint, because that was one of our biggest businesses. It's definitely the weddings and the big parties are not going to happen. But there are two ways, which is quite interesting. What's happening is that we also deal with a lot of catering for a lot of luxury brands like your Gucci and things like that. And they eventually, when they do open, will you know, have their customers coming on a social distancing scheme. You know, only have one person at a time. So to be able to give them F&B solutions, again, it will be this, you know, one packaged, you know, like a cake or a crostini or whatever it is that is delivered to them. So our catering may exist, but in a very different form, which is quite interesting. And we're developing now a whole other way of giving catering. And similarly, even with homes, you know, you have you give them catering without the fluff, so you send them the food and you send them exactly instructions on how you have to plate it and exactly the quantity you want, and it's like a catered meal, except you don't have the chefs bustling around in your kitchen, so we'll find ways to reinvent how those verticals will work.
I'm not sure that will be enough incentive to get Suchita into the kitchen, because she says she wants to stay out. So Suchita, what is your aha moment? Is it this moment? Did it happen before? Are you recalibrating your business plans, your roadmap? Do you need to draw up a new roadmap?
I think like pretty much every other business out there, we've really had to rethink, what we're about. And I think the one accelerator that we've stepped on is how do you digitize more SMEs, whether it is by helping them sell online. We've also done a couple of really fun experiments where we've done live streaming from stores. So people can watch a live stream on our app and, order products as they go along. So we've really sort of, accelerated digitization of this SME. And the good news is that they also now want to come online finally, right? Earlier there used to be a lot of resistance. I don't have GST, this, that, and the other, a lot of that's changed. I think the big aha moment, for me, has actually been two things. One, my ability to articulate my thoughts. So I've actually started, writing much more than I used to. And by writing, I mean essentially just sharing things that, I've learned while building LBB through public platforms, right? And as any, young entrepreneur, you always think 20 times before you say something out publicly, right? And given that it's not my nature to, be pretty public either, I think for me, making that switch, getting comfortable sharing my ideas, getting comfortable saying, this is what I believe in, and this is what I think is the future of content, community, commerce. Just taking a stand publicly, I think that's been the big aha moment for me, because essentially what that means to me is that I am confident in being able to not just articulate, but stand by things that I believe in, right? So for me, that's what's been it. It's a little meta, it's a little unrelated to just LPV, but for me, that's definitely been one big win.
Correct. I can see Chiki's probably got 6 book ideas from this session. Her brain's going click, 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 and saying, oh, that's a book, that's a book, that's a book. Okay, very quickly, I have, I don't want to call it a rapid fire round, because that's well, anyway, but I just want to ask the three of you one quick question. And I will start with you, Ambika. What is the one piece of advice that you will give to women starting out? No, you're mute. Unmute.
Sorry, I keep forgetting to do that. I think that you just have to go. I mean, don't think so much about it. If you have the support and you have the backing, you have to realize that you are going to make a lot of mistakes, but the mistakes is a huge part of your growth. And if you don't start, you're never going to know how it's going to pan out. So just go, just go with, because a lot of this, and I have to say that, it may sound a little fluffy, but a lot of being entrepreneurship is also the gut, and it's also the feeling that you get, and whether you have to take that right decision or that partnership is the correct one. So you just at some, obviously have your plan in place and then just run with it.
Wow, that's very courageous. I don't think I would ever have had the courage that you three have in such ample display. Suchita, what's the one thing?
So for I think the one advice.
Piece of advice.
Yeah. So I think the one advice that I'd give is, just surround yourself with the great mentors and advisors. I think, as entrepreneurs, a lot of us have imposter syndrome. And I think, especially when you're female, it's exacerbated, right? So what I'd say is find really great mentors and advisors. Your mentors and advisors could be folks from your family, they could be folks externally, it could be, even some of your colleagues who you can lean on and count on. But create that support group around you, because there are a lot of people out there who are more than willing to help. You just have to put your hand up and ask. So don't be afraid to ask questions, and please surround yourself with people who you aspire to be like, who are, as ambitious, if not more, as competent, if not more than you, and surround yourself with them.
Right. Chiki, what's your piece of advice?
Don't give up. You will want to give up a lot. You will want to give up every month, every 6 months. There'll be many reasons. There'll be work reasons, there might be money reasons, there might be home reasons. And I would say don't give up, because I think the thing that we all owe ourselves is to be the best version of ourselves, whether we're men or women. And work often allows us to do that. You know, everyone, that's why we work. I mean, I think a lot of us, we come from backgrounds where potentially we didn't need the job to make our everyday livelihoods, right? I mean, there would have been some support somehow. But we work to be the best versions of ourselves, and men take this for granted, right? They don't even consider that. But I think, so that's what I would say. And you will want to give up. I mean, and that I will guarantee. I don't know anyone who doesn't. And you have to go to sleep, have a gin and tonic if you like your drink, go to sleep, and it always feels better in the morning. I think I can see some looks of recognition here on my fellow panelists. That would be my advice.
Right. So if I can ask you a follow-up to that, I mean, what is the one mistake you wish you hadn't made? I mean, we all say we learn from our mistakes, and thank God we made mistakes, and you know, that's the conventional wisdom. But if you were to go back, what's the one thing you would tell your younger self? Don't do this. Anyone? Ambika, you want to come in? Yeah.
Oh, were you talking to me? Sorry. No.
Directing it.
That was actually for Chiki, but I thought maybe you want to think about it.
Oh,
so
sorry. The mistake, I make so many every day. I don't even think, I mean, personality mistakes. I'm incredibly impatient. I really often lack tact. When I'm critical, particularly with my team, I can be heavy-handed. I can be insensitive. My husband says I'm terribly bossy. Okay. And my husband's very nice, by the way. He's not a particularly male chauvinistic type guy. Okay, he's very sensitive and all. Like, so if he's calling me bossy, you know, I wish I wasn't on my phone all the time. I'm always on my phone. All right. My son's got that habit now. God, I'll go on and on and on. But anyway, let me stop at all that.
Yeah.
Those are my everyday mistakes. At work, I think when I did my first fundraise, it was a decent fundraise. I think we spent the money unwisely. I think we spent the money in my first fundraise unwisely. So at a business thing, I don't know whether I would have actually been able to change that. I think it's one thing that people say startups do. They spent more money on certain things we shouldn't have. We made the wrong calls. We did not spend that first raise. If I could look back on work, I would say that, like, you could be smarter about that.
Suchita?
I think for, the one mistake, in my opinion, would, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword, but I wish we had raised more money. I wish, I wish the 5 million Series A that we raised last year, I wish we had raised that 3 years ago. Because I do think the one thing capital gives you is the ability to try things out, right? It gives you the ability to test, and also the other thing that it does is it just accelerates your learning, which I learned over the past year. And Chiki, to the point that you made, trust me, everyone wastes their fundraise all the time. So and there are people who've like pissed away billions of dollars, and frankly really don't give a shit about it. But I think that's just the nature of the industry that we guys are in, right? Where you have to try, you have to test things out, you have to have a large appetite for risk. So I think I don't think it's I wouldn't say it's a mistake, because frankly it wasn't entirely in my control, but I do wish we had raised more money earlier and accelerated our learning curve, because I do think we're onto something big, but had we had the confidence and the gusto on day one, things would have we would have probably just been exactly where we are, but our learning curve would have been accelerated. So that would be my big takeaway.
Thank you. I know we're coming very close to audience Q&A, and I don't want to eat into that time. So Ambika, you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think looking back, I think it was trying to do too much. So I think that we reached a stage, and obviously also maybe that's a little bit of an entrepreneur quality where you like, this idea came and that idea came and let's try this and let's experiment with that and let's go forward with this. And I think we reached a stage where we diversified quite a lot and we were running so many different verticals that it was just a lot on our plate very quickly. And I feel like if I look back, maybe if we tried to slow down a bit and not try and do so many things at the same time and maybe concentrate on one or two of them and really, scale that up and then move on, perhaps it would have been slightly wiser in terms of our growth pattern. But now we're in it. We got
Okay. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
No, I said, but now I'm in it. So now we just got to make it work.
Great, thank you. So here are some audience questions, and I'm going to tell you, I'm sorry, I've got these on my phone and I don't know who the questioner, who the person is, but here's a question for you, Suchita. I don't know who's asking this question, but the question is, what would you say has been the highlight of your I could never say this word, entrepreneurial journey so far? The highlight.
I think the highlight, and I could sound cool about it, but I'll give you my personal highlight. So I could have said my team and all of that, but the actual answer is I got a chance to meet my hero, Clayton Christensen. I absolutely love his books and I love his writing. Reading his book, Competing Against Luck, totally changed the way I think about business. And I was lucky enough to meet him at HBS. He wrote the book Innovator's Dilemma. It was the best. I don't think I've ever fangirled over, I was literally like a 16-year-old around Justin Bieber when I met him. So I think one big highlight, obviously team, product market fit, all of that is great, but meeting Clayton Christensen was pretty freaking awesome.
Okay. Here's a question for Chiki. What is your mantra for crisis management?
The first thing I do is I step back and I really, really try and be calm initially. Even if I'm not feeling like it, even my heart is beating super fast. I also find that it's kind of useful to, when things are really bad, to laugh. At least I do it. I go, God, this is just like a bad film. Whatever, I make some joke, right? But lighten it. So, and last, I'm an eternal optimist, so I always feel like I can find an answer. I really, like, I'm not a person, I feel like there's a solution to everything, there's a hack to everything, and I'm going to find it, and I'm going to win the day. And it might take me a little bit longer, but I am. But I know optimism is a very personality thing. For example, like my husband's much less has that gung-ho spirit than I do. There it is. I don't think you can will it. I am that sort of slightly Annie of Green Gables type person. But I would say if you can, stay still for a little bit and see if you can laugh. It's hard when you hit crises.
Ambika, this is, for me at least, I think a bit of a difficult question, but somebody's asking you this question. And they want to know that my daughter is 2 years old. What can I do to encourage an entrepreneurship spirit within her? How old is your son?
He is 2.
Okay.
Yeah, he is 2. But I think I have to lean back on my own upbringing, and that is, it's not. I don't think it's specifically that I was, told to do certain things that made me want to be entrepreneurship. I think it was definitely watching. My father has a very, very big role to play in this, and I think watching how he inculcated how important it was to make work your priority and to always also give me the support, saying that if you want to try something and if you want to do something, then let's talk about it and let's see whether we can do it. I think I think the environment, the home environment that you're in, and the kind of the counseling that your parents or your sisters can give you has definitely played a large role, just in terms of also just getting confidence to go up and do it. So to inculcate that in your child, I think that's been a pretty pivotal thing.
Yeah, so that's pretty much also what Suchita says in terms of having a working mother was inspirational for you. There's another question for you, Ambika. And it is, how can young entrepreneurs set themselves apart in such competitive markets?
Look, you have to, competition is always going to be there, and competition is it is actually very healthy, because I know competition for me just, it's what gives me the drive to keep being better and perfect and making sure that I'm really ahead of the ball. I think you just have to be really clear with what your vision is and what your product is and what your goal is, and do not let, don't change things because you feel like, initially I was going to do this, but the customer actually likes that, so let me change my product and do that. Do not do that. That is the worst mistake that you can make. You have to stick by your guns. It's going to take you time. It's going to take you time to get the confidence from your customers, but you stick by what your original vision was, and you don't let anything stray that. And I think that if you're very strong with that, and you're very strong with that, and all your focus is going into making that work, I think that is what's going to keep you ahead as far as competition is coming.
Right. Suchita, somebody wants to know if you have any tips for building an engaged community for your brand.
Absolutely. I think the number one thing is, just be as authentic as you can, and I think that's really what's helped LBB build itself out the way we have been able to, whether it's on social media or definitely our webinar app, where our most engaged community is. So I think just be authentic, be very real with your users. Also, this is commonly used, but think customer first, right? A lot of us have a lot of biases about, who our user is and what they do. But I think the one big win for us has been we've always tried to keep our own biases aside. So it's not really about what, a colleague of mine likes or what I like. It's about what the user wants, right? And what they like. So if the user wants a Roji Nagar, give it to them, right? If the user wants a high-end peanut butter, give it to them. You need to service needs and problems that consumers have. And the more you lean into what your user actually wants, the better your products, will become. But give it to them authentically. Give it to them in a way where it ties in with what your brand is about.
Correct. We spoke about this very, very briefly, and I'm glad, Chiki, somebody's asking you this question. Oh dear, I just seem to have lost it. Oh, here it is. And that was, the question is, when we talk of women in business, we only talk about urban women. So how do we broad base this conversation to include rural women and the very, very different parameters and dynamics that work there?
I really don't know. I mean, that's the answer, because I just don't have the experience. I have friends who work in development, and they would be able to respond to some of this question with, firstly, do I think we need to do it? Yes. Am I the person to answer that question? No. I don't know if anyone else in the panel has some experience in it. I think Ambika would like to say something.
Ambika's because she's worked with rural communities. Yeah.
I'm going to interject in this. I think because I worked a lot with probably a very backward community in Haryana, in a place called Nu, which actually was Muslim dominated. So definitely there was no question of the woman coming out doing any form of work. It took me 1 year just to convince the men to do farming. But simultaneously, I had exposure to a lot of the families and a lot of the women. And what's quite interesting is, I think education, I think you have, it's not a one-time thing. It's not that you go in and you give them a session and say, we'll come in and we'll do this and now aap ye karo. It is ongoing. It is ongoing. You go back 50 times to them and you explain to them how important it is that the woman gets the right to also help earning in the family, that they get a position where they can go work. And then organizations like myself and you guys, you go and help set up, so it's a very simple thing. Like, for example, I produce a pesto sauce. There's no reason why, the women in this village can't produce it for me. You set up and you go there and you set up a small little factory and you teach them how to do it and you give them some empowerment and education. You do it. There will have to be some guidelines. You will have to make sure they get home safely. You will have to make sure their work timings are separate. But these are small compromises you can make to at least try and give them an opportunity to work.
Correct. Suchita, do you want to weigh in? How do we make this dialogue more inclusive, given that the four of us are rooted in our urban reality, given that our privilege, our background. And yet, I'm sure all of us agree that we need to make this dialogue much more inclusive.
Absolutely. I think, what Ambika has done with Farm Love, and there are a lot of other folks doing this with, with more craft focused enterprises, right? So there's a really cool company called Skill Samaritan that also works with, a small village on the outskirts of Delhi, and they get, rural women to basically use their charpaying skills and create really nice, treasure trunks and charpais and things like those. I really do think, for the dialogue to happen, two things. Hopefully, this call to localization will encourage more of us to embrace, forms of art or forms of craft that are much more native. I think the other, a big thing that's at least happened in tech is, for brands to build hundreds of millions of monthly active users, you have to get into more. You have to get into more regional languages, right? And hopefully, I love what Pratilipi is doing with their platform, where they're, just getting more and more folks to become micro creators or micro authors in their own way. So I do think the dialogue has already started. I'll err on Chiki's side, where unfortunately we don't work with too many rural women for me to comment, but we do support hundreds of thousands of local brands. And what's lovely to see is they are tapping into local artisans, they're tapping into local crafts, and they're getting the local community, to create phenomenal products that they are then distributing externally. You, in fact, see this happen in the beauty segment very well, where a lot of your Pahadi type brands are, now becoming much more mainstream with audiences and consumers leaning towards, Ayurveda and clean beauty and things like those. So yeah, the trends worldwide are changing, and hopefully there is a more stronger dialogue in between the two.
Right, and we do have a huge population of artisans, craftspeople in Delhi, in the semi-urban and someone who knows Delhi like nobody else, and in other cities. I'm sure you're aware of that. Right. I think we're pretty much running out of time. So I'm going to ask you a final question, which is something that Women in Labor and Wild City wants to do for all its various sessions. And it's a round called Do One Thing. So my question to all of you, my panelists, is this. What is the one thing that our audience who's listening here today, what is the one thing that our audience can do to create progress around women and work? Whoever wants to go first.
I can go first. I think pay it forward, right? So the one thing that you can do is pay it forward. If your female boss helped you out, help your female colleague out, right? If your mom set the right example for you, you set the right example for your kids. If another female entrepreneur helped you out, you figure out 5 other women entrepreneurs who you can help out, right? But I do think, given the privilege that most entrepreneurial women, specifically in urban cities, have in India, it is our duty to do nothing but to pay it forward. So I'd say figure out a way to pay it forward, right? Buy from women, employ women, help women out, run a poll on your Instagram, auction your Saturday out to just answering business questions, for other female entrepreneurs, whatever it takes, man, but just pay it forward in your own way.
Mine would be encourage, never say no. Open doors for any woman who says, I want to work. It doesn't have to be even an entrepreneur. Anyone who says, I want to do something, say yes. Say yes to them. Don't say no. Do that in your family. Do that with your friends. We should just all be encouraging. It's, even in our class of women, the going into work is still, even now, it's forget about the world of women who don't have the privileges we do. It's still, we have a long way to go. So yes, open doors. Encourage everyone.
Ambika.
I echo both what Suchita and Chiki said, that I think that, you need to definitely, just in terms of how you structure your businesses, to try and have equal amount of women and men working, and if not more women working, if you can manage it. Also have like for us in the kitchen, it is very much a male dominated environment, and to try somehow to change that, and that's something that anyone in the restaurant industry can try and do, is to try and encourage more women to get in the kitchen and make the environment conducive and friendly and confident for them. And also in terms of your own role, I find that because also with a lot of people that I hire, they're very young girls who are on the brink of getting married, and I feel like you play a big advisory role in their lives. You set an example yourself that if you can do this, I can do this and I can create this, there's no reason why get married, have children, but that cannot stop you from moving forward. And I think that, we've discussed about the fact that that's a very pivotal time that we see dropping off. Just need to give them a lot of mentoring and a lot of confidence and courage to say that there are ways that you can make it work.
Thank you so much. We could go on talking. This subject, women and work, is a personal obsession of mine. I keep learning so much, and I am actually astounded by the courage and the bravery of my wonderful panelists, Chiki Sarkar, Ambika Seth, Suchita Salwan. Thank you so much for taking out the time. I know because as working moms, two-legged, four-legged kids, you all have your hands full, and I know how difficult it is to take out time from a regular day. Thank you so much. You've been absolutely inspirational. Thank you to my online audience for being here. I'm very sorry if I was not able to get to every question, but thank you for engaging and for those thought-provoking questions and for even listening. Thank you, of course, to American Center, our wonderful hosts. We're not there physically, but they pulled this off, and here we are, as planned and as promised. Thank you, of course, to Women in Labor and to Sarah and the whole team at Wild City. Stay safe, take care, and be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.